of this Lifestyle Medicine Educational Symposium. I'm so excited to kick off the event with our introduction to lifestyle medicine. Today we're going to just do an overview of both what lifestyle medicine is and then what to expect with the upcoming program. So, and actually I should add, I'm faculty at the North Colorado Family Medicine Residency Program. So I have no disclosures, and the objectives for my lecture today are to list 5 diseases. So at the end of this lecture, you'll be able to list 5 diseases that lifestyle medicine could be used for. You can explain that lifestyle medicine is a cost-effective means for treating chronic disease, and that is in conjunction with conventional medicine. And then assessing, you'll be able to assess readiness to change both in yourself, and some of the people watching this series are providers. And so this will be especially useful kind of in a twofold approach. So my hope is that they can assess readiness for behavior change within themselves and then also use this for their patients. So just an overview of what we'll be covering. So first I'll talk about what lifestyle medicine is. I'll kind of go briefly over what the different pillars of health are, and then talk about what this certification is. Then I'm going to talk about why you should embrace lifestyle medicine, what the 6 pillars are in more detail in the lecture series that we have coming up. Talk briefly about behavior change, and then the next steps. So what is lifestyle medicine? So this was founded about 20 years ago by a group of providers who felt like we were kind of missing the boat with chronic disease, because everyone who seems to fall into the lifestyle medicine world has gotten to this point where they keep seeing disease over and over again and keep putting band-aids on with various treatments, but aren't getting at the root cause. And so lifestyle medicine was created to focus on that root cause of why we have gotten where we are. So there are 6 pillars: healthful eating, focusing on more of a plant-based diet; increasing physical activity; developing strategies to manage stress; forming and maintaining relationships; improving sleep; and avoiding risky substances. So why should you embrace lifestyle medicine? So this infographic from the CDC is very telling. 6 in 10 adults in the US have chronic disease, and 4 in 10 adults in the US have 2 or more chronic diseases. And these chronic diseases are a leading cause of death and disability, as well as a leading cause of the rise in our healthcare costs. Because you can imagine, as the adult population grows and more individuals have chronic disease, and we aren't getting to the root cause, those chronic diseases will worsen over time. That is just how chronic disease works. And so if we're able to find ways to address the underlying cause for the chronic disease, the hope is that we can at least stagnate the disease or even reverse the disease for those who have it. And then also the hope would be individuals would learn from others who are doing these lifestyle changes and hopefully prevent people who don't already have chronic disease from getting it in the first place. Some of the main driving chronic diseases in our country are heart disease, cancer, chronic lung disease, stroke, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, and chronic kidney disease. And these are things that we see all the time, and we may or may not realize lifestyle is directly related to them. And I'm not saying with any of this that lifestyle is the only factor. This has been a long discussion about genetics and lifestyle, and what's the main cause for these diseases, and there's a combination. And epigenetics is really at play with lifestyle. So most people have a genetic predisposition to some type of chronic disease. The question is, will they get it or not? And this always baffles people, because if you think about somebody who smokes, you might see one person who develops lung cancer, and one person who barely has any lung disease at all and is never requiring supplemental oxygen. And there's such a range, and you wonder why. And again, this has to do with that interplay between lifestyle choices and how they modify genes to then represent and develop disease. And so the analogy that I'm not the biggest fan of, but I have yet to find a better example, is that genetics loads the gun and environment pulls the trigger. So the stage is set, and if you can adopt and follow lifestyle changes, ideally from childhood, but at any point in time, the hope is that you won't turn those genes on that will express disease. Or if you do turn those genes on with time, it will be when you're much older. And we've seen recently a huge rise in young individuals being diagnosed with diabetes, hypertension, kidney disease. And it always blows my mind, seeing people in their 40s who are starting dialysis from uncontrolled diabetes. And so, especially in my role, both with the residency and as a hospitalist, I've seen firsthand the effects of these diseases, which is why I feel very passionate around this. And chronic diseases are costly, just like that last slide mentioned. And so, as we know, and actually maybe not everyone does know this, 85 to 90% of healthcare dollars are spent on chronic disease. And we spend $3.35 trillion on healthcare. So you can imagine that's a lot of money spent on chronic disease. And it's actually estimated that about 80% of chronic disease are attributed to modifiable lifestyle factors. So that's amazing. And there's actually, I believe it's at least a third of cancer. And I believe that I found a statistic, one study looked at, in some forms of cancer, it's closer to 60% of cancers that could be prevented if we were to improve lifestyle factors. And again, this is that interplay between genetics and our lifestyle. And so there are always going to be some individuals who unfortunately will develop cancers and chronic diseases despite living a very healthy and balanced life. But there are many people that we can at least prevent from getting these diseases if we can focus on lifestyle. And they've actually looked, and they found that employers who have instituted comprehensive wellness programs, so this is not just saying, do this quick step challenge. This is comprehensive. So looking at multiple factors of wellness and how that influences their employees and supporting their employees throughout the time that their program's in place, that they found return of investment ranging anywhere from $1.88 to $3.27 for every dollar spent. There's been a number of studies that look at workplace wellness and the effects on productivity and overall retention of employees. And it's pretty amazing to see that when a business or entity invests in the individuals, they feel supported and they want to stay, and they also are more productive, and they overall cost the medical plan less. So we can translate this into healthcare, because you can also imagine that if we can create programs that support individuals by doing more than just saying eat less, exercise more, because tell me someone who doesn't know that, right? We all know that. But what we want to do is find out why it's so hard to not eat less and exercise more, and support people along their journey so that when they get to the point where maybe they are eating less and exercising more, I think I said that wrong a second ago, but so when they get to the point where they are eating less and exercising more, they're sleeping enough, they have positive relationships, their mental and emotional health is balanced, we're at a point where they are thriving, and they're staying out of the hospital, they're not requiring as many office visits. And so there are some programs out there that do comprehensive lifestyle medicine, and they have shown these results that people who follow an intensive program that looks at all areas of wellness have a significant decrease in the severity of their diseases, and also the cost to the healthcare system and themselves. And a few examples of things that, so the CDC had some great statistics on some various conditions and the number of people affected by these and the cost to the system. And again, it's not all about money. I'm not trying to say that, but I do think that it's important that we see that this is a factor, because often the rationale for not doing lifestyle approaches is that they're not cost effective, and we really need to reevaluate that argument. So heart disease and stroke kill 900,000 people a year, and they cost $199 billion a year. And on top of that, there's $131 billion of lost productivity. So that's a pretty profound amount of money. Cancer, 1.6 million people are diagnosed annually, and 600,000 die. And it typically costs about $174 billion a year. Type 2 diabetes affects 34.2 million individuals, and that's just the official diagnosis, not people who have an elevated fasting blood sugar, which is often called pre-diabetes. And this is costing $327 billion, and there's both in healthcare costs and lost productivity. Obesity is obviously a multifaceted condition, some of which we have control over and some of which we don't. Again, the genetic interplay. But as a whole, when they track healthcare costs, people who have obesity do cost more. My assumption is that this is related to for individuals with obesity who also have chronic disease, not individuals with obesity who are physically fit, which will be discussed in a future lecture as well. But obesity costs $147 billion a year. Arthritis. So arthritis is an interesting one because many people who have arthritis tend to not be physically active because of the pain. But arthritis actually, the favorite saying of many orthopedic surgeons is motion is the lotion. So by moving, it actually helps your joints. That's why people with arthritis, once they start moving, after they get up out of bed and move around a little, they feel better. And if they've been sitting for a prolonged period of time, they feel worse. And so arthritis can be grouped into a chronic disease that lifestyle could modify. And it costs $140 billion of medical costs and $164 billion of indirect costs, such as productivity. Smoking. So if everyone who smokes currently quit and no new people could start, then it could save $170 billion. That's just this year. So that's a pretty amazing amount. And the rates of smoking have decreased. We're here in Colorado where marijuana is legal, and it's important to note that smoking marijuana can have some of the same effects as tobacco smoke. And so trying to educate people that smoking is smoking, and those toxins can result in many chronic lung issues. Alcohol, so there currently is spent $249 billion annually on alcohol, not on alcohol itself, but the medical costs associated with alcohol, and 88,000 annual deaths. And a statistic that the CDC had that was pretty profound, I thought, was that 1 in 10 working adults die from alcohol. So, or sorry, the deaths, let me rephrase that, the deaths in working adults, because it's an age that we typically don't see people passing away very often, but of those who die, who are working adult age, 1 in 10 of those are related to alcohol. And then physical activity, which is a behavior, not a disease, just like alcohol use and smoking. So indirectly, it's really hard to measure physical activity in its direct costs or physical inactivity and the direct cost on the system because it's so multifaceted. And there haven't been many studies that look specifically at physical fitness and healthcare costs, but inactivity is indirectly costing $117 billion annually, according to the Office of the Surgeon General. So these are just a few examples of why this approach is so important, because these conditions need to be addressed so that we have resources for everyone in the next 20 years and that we can help people regain some of their life, because those lost productivity, you can imagine anyone who has a job and can't do their job is probably suffering in some way, financially suffering, emotionally suffering. And so these things, even though I'm giving you dollar amounts as if it's an easy thing to relate, it's important to remember that these things all translate to quality of life. And anyone with these conditions will tell you that their quality of life would be better if they didn't have it. So the 6 pillars of health for lifestyle medicine, as I mentioned before, nutrition is eating a largely plant-based diet. So if you were going to be, a devout lifestyle medicine follower, you would eat no meat products. Despite being a dietitian myself prior to medical school and being very passionate about this, I do not follow that diet. So this is not saying you have to be 100% of any of these things. The approach of lifestyle medicine is learning how you can make small steps towards improving these different pillars. So from a nutrition standpoint, you want to eat more plants, eat real food. Things that have animal products have been largely linked with numerous diseases. And really by decreasing the amount of animal product, even just once a week, like Meatless Monday, can have a significant impact on blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes risk, heart disease risk, your weight, many things. And it can just give you more energy because plants contain things that we can't measure in a lab. So phytochemicals and vitamins and minerals together do pretty amazing things for the body. And it's been shown in many studies that when we isolate those things, we can't reproduce the results. So, if you do one study and you look at it, I believe it was a China study that looked at a diet, and they found all this healthful plant-based diet resulted in less cancer, better weight control, less chronic disease. And they thought that there were certain nutrients they could pull out that might mimic some of these health benefits. So they pulled them out and they gave people supplements, and they didn't have the same benefit. And it's because it's the whole diet and the whole food. It's not specific individual nutrients that we can measure as clearly. So trying to just increase vegetables, and even just stating it that way, because when we talk about removing things, we get a little defensive, like no one wants anything taken away from them, especially something they love. So if we can talk about increasing produce as opposed to removing meat, it's a little more positive spin, and you can only eat so much in a day. So likely if you continue to increase your produce, you'll cut back a little bit on your animal products. Physical activity. So this is really just focused on trying to be as physically active as possible. And it's important to remember that physical activity and exercise are different. And so with physical activity, we want to be moving throughout the day as much as possible. So an example is I could be standing at a desk right now, or like a walking desk as I talk to you. Unfortunately, I'm not. But even things like taking the stairs instead of the elevator, parking further away, increase our activity. Exercise is different, and there will be a lecture in this series about exercise and its benefits on your health. But actually having planned intentional exercise where your heart rate gets up, and also exercises that focus on muscle development have a lot of impactful property, or it can be very impactful in your management of chronic disease and prevention of chronic disease. Sleep. So this is focused on getting enough sleep, and our lecture on this is going to go into some very tangible things you can do to improve your sleep. And that typically people need to be getting 7 to 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep a night, and most individuals are not, unfortunately. So sleep is really vital, and it gets overlooked because your sleep will influence your physical activity, how much energy you have to go exercise. It'll influence your diet. It's going to influence your mental health. It might make you more prone to try, if you're having trouble sleeping, try alcohol to sleep. And it's going to make it hard for you to have this personal, connected, positive approach because you're so tired and you don't want to do anything. So I feel like sleep is sort of the unsung hero of all this that we really need to focus on. Mental emotional health. And so in the previous slide, this was the one that talked about trying to focus on stress management. And so for mental emotional health, we really want to be, obviously mental illness that has diagnoses, but dealing with things that are influencing our mental well-being that may not have official diagnoses. Avoiding risky substances. This one's pretty obvious, obviously, with the, not smoking, trying not to drink too much, don't use drugs, etc. But our lecture on this is actually going to focus more on this kind of culture around some of the substances that has been normalized. So wine culture with parents, especially moms, has been one of those that I've seen quite a bit, and it can be very toxic and harmful. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the less obvious discussions around risky substances. And then the personal connectedness, positive psychology is really focused on having great relationships, having a positive outlook, and how that influences your overall approach at life. Because if you feel connected and positive, you're more likely to engage in these behaviors. And I apologize, this slide is very light. But if you download the slides, you can see it. But this goes through our timeline. Okay, so here we are today in September 2nd with the introduction. We're going to then go to the power of plants, followed by stress less, live more. Then sleep and health, followed by stress, culture, and you, and that's the risky substance talk. Then that will be followed by improving well-being through a practice of gratitude. That title might change slightly and be kind of more around compassion and connectedness, but that's the one around positive psychology. And then physical activity as a vital sign is what we'll end with. And the very last session is not educational per se. We're going to be recapping. I'll summarize some of the highlights from each of these talks, and then it'll be a Q&A, so you can submit questions in advance. And so the upcoming slide will talk to you about how to register if you haven't already registered for this. And this slide is obviously very challenging to read. Again, it's meant for you to review in the downloads, but basically the stages of change are really important in determining what your next step will be. And so this is just a very brief overview, but there is a theoretical model called the stages of change that looks at where people are on that stage of change, and then uses that to determine what intervention to do so that we can be more likely to be successful. So when you're thinking about being ready to make a behavior change, I want you to assess how ready you are on a scale of 0 to 10. And you need to be honest with yourself, because you can't say you're a 10 and then you can't say I'm a 10 to start walking every day and then the next day not start walking. That means you're not quite at a 10. Okay, so 0, I'm not ready at all. I don't even think I have a problem. And 10 is I am so ready. I'm doing this. I will do it right now if I can. And find kind of where you land on there. And so if you're kind of a 0, 1, you're probably pre-contemplative. This means that you don't really have an intention. You don't think you have a problem. And it's fine. I think this is one of the things in medicine as providers we have trouble with acknowledging, why someone who smokes doesn't think that's a problem. But if people aren't ready to change, if I'm not ready to make a change, there's no sense in me taking the time and effort to make a plan if I really don't think it's a problem. So at this point, we want to educate ourselves on, what is it a problem? What other things can I focus on that I would like to improve? And then maybe down the road, I'll decide that actually was a problem that I want to address. Contemplation. So this is someone who's like, 2 or 3. They know they have a problem, but they aren't really ready to change. So this might be someone who doesn't really get defensive when you ask them to quit smoking, but instead is like, yeah, I've been trying, I've thought about trying, but I don't know. I don't think I'm ready yet. I still enjoy it too much. So again, that's fine. Meet people where they are, or meet yourself where you are, and figure out what could get you to the next stage. Preparation. This is somebody who's kind of in the middle, 4 to 6-ish, where they want to change. They have committed. Their father-in-law was just diagnosed with lung cancer. They're done with smoking. They want to do something about this. And so this is the most exciting stage because you've got so much excitement about it, and you get to kind of troubleshoot and come up with some really tangible goals so you can get some success early on. The action stage would be people who are like a 7, 8, 9, 10, really 9, 10, but kind of in that range. There could be a wide range of where you feel like you are, but these are people who are ready. They're taking action. They already have a plan. They're doing this. And then maintenance is someone who has done this for 6 months. This is not new hat. They feel like they've really established a routine. And then relapse are people who fall back on old patterns, which we all do. Everyone relapses. The key is to learn from your relapse and not let it last too long, okay? Because if we beat ourselves up about relapsing, we're going to fall further back in this cycle, and it's going to be really hard to get started again because of the negative self-talk. So once you identify your stage, take action based on your stage, and then continue to reevaluate with every goal that you have. And then SMART goals, I'll just talk about real quickly. So this is not a new thing at all, nothing I made up. So SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So this is something that gives us a measurable item and holds us accountable. Patients often will tell me that they would like to lose weight, or they would like to walk more. And that sounds great, but it's very non-specific. So how do we measure walking more? Is it 1 minute more, or is it walking every day? And it's hard to say. So specific is be very specific. So let's say I want to walk more. We'll use that. So walking is your activity. That's, I guess, specific right there, right? Now, how much? So what can we measure? Well, I am going to make sure that I am walking 30 minutes every day, 5 days a week. Okay? So 30 minutes, not every day, sorry. 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Is this attainable? Well, I already walk, 30 minutes 2 days a week. So sure, 5 days a week is attainable. And then realistic. Could I realistically achieve this goal of walking 5 days a week? Does my schedule allow that? And then timely. When are we going to check? Like, what is the length of this goal? So let's say I'm going to walk 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week for the next 4 weeks. So that means in 4 weeks, I will have a calendar reminder to say, evaluate goals. And I'll have tracked whether or not I did what I thought I was going to do, marking a calendar or something. And then I'll assess, okay, I met my goal 80% of the time, which is great. So what will my next goal be? Do I want to stay with this goal or tweak it a little now that I'm kind of have this momentum in this routine? So always write SMART goals. You can have a big overarching goal like you want to run a marathon, but if right now you don't walk every day or run it at all, that's a huge leap. So we need to set small goals along the way as checkpoints to get to our big goal. So to learn more about everything we're doing, we're going to have videos available at this link. And then if you're a banner provider who would like CME, we are working on getting CME approval, so that should be in place by the time that you watch this. So you can click that link and choose banner provider CME, and we'll be emailing you updates. If for some reason our CME is not approved, we will notify you about that. And then the Virgin Pulse Points, if you're a banner employee, you can get this program as a chronic disease management program. And I believe it is 250 points. But you'll go to this website to register, and then we can email you updates about that, because there are some steps for both of those groups that need to be done in addition to just watching the videos. There's some web resources you can refer to learn more about lifestyle medicine, and both for yourself and if you're a provider for your patients. And sorry, I put questions on there, but this is not not a question session, so there will be questions available or you can submit questions for the Q&A at the end, the last week of our series. And so we'll be sure to post a link where you can submit those questions in advance. So I'm so excited to get started with you all. If you have any feedback, please let us